AITA for cutting off my parents after they refused to help me as my daughter was dying? My name is Nathan Brooks. I am 36 years old, and although I insist on calling myself a writer, sometimes I feel like I am just a castaway in a 500-square-foot apartment. We live in one of those forgotten towns in the Rust Belt, a corner of the country where the wind whistles between vinyl-sided houses and the silence is as vast as the cornfields surrounding us. Calling myself a writer sounds more pretentious than ever today. The reality is that I am a skinny man with a back hunched from hours in front of a laptop whose battery died long ago, polishing sentences with the blind and somewhat absurd faith that some editor in New York will finally decide to rescue my work from oblivion. I have been accumulating rejections for over a decade. I have drawers, both physical and digital, crammed with manuscripts no one will read. In town, some neighbors look at me with that mix of pity and condescension and call me the undiscovered author, but when I close the front door, I am just a dreamer suffocated by the electric bill, late rent, and the constant echo of my children crying. I have 3 reasons not to give up, even if I sometimes struggle to breathe. Emily is 8 years old. She has brown hair that is always a bit messy and eyes that shine with that illusion I have already lost. Then there is Oliver, 5 years old, with his mischievous smile and those tiny hands that always reach for the hem of my t-shirt, as if it were his only anchor. And little Lucas, 3 years old, who is pure laughter and a constant demand for cuddles. They are my universe, but they are also an emotional and financial burden I never imagined I would have to bear in absolute solitude. Rebecca, their mother, left 2 years ago. Her last words still burn. She said I was too poor, that I did not know how to support a family, and that my failure as a writer was dragging her down. I also remember with painful clarity that Sunday afternoon I watched her pack her bags while I held Lucas, who was barely taking his first steps. I do not blame her entirely, or at least that is what I try to tell myself, so I do not go crazy. Maybe she was just looking for a brighter life, far from unpaid bills and this cold that seeps through the cracks in the windows. But nothing erases the trauma of that winter night when I was left alone in the doorway with Emily tugging at my sleeve, asking when Mom would come back, and Oliver crying without understanding why his mother's suitcase was no longer in the closet. Since then, my life has been an exercise in juggling acts. I am a father, a mother, a cook of survival meals, and a content writer for any website that pays a cent per word. Our apartment, with its walls yellowed by age and its 2 scant rooms, is our war refuge. Every morning I get up before the sun peaks over the horizon. I make a quick coffee, toast some sliced bread, and wake the troops. I dress them against the clock, and we rush out to drop them off at daycare and the local public elementary school. When I return to the silence of the apartment, I open the laptop. I know literature does not put food on the table, so I turn into a copywriter for hire. I write ads for car insurance, edit lifestyle blog texts, and even translate technical manuals with the help of dictionaries. By day, I rent my pen to the highest bidder. By night, I try to be the author I always dreamed of. And in between, the chaos of parenting. Sewing Oliver's sweatpants, comforting Emily when she feels lonely, and reading them the same story every night, so the world seems like a safe place before sleeping. My family of origin is another open wound. My parents live in their bubble in Florida, in a condo facing the ocean where light floods everything through large windows. They call it Christmas or on a birthday, more out of obligation than affection, to remind me that I should have studied engineering or business administration. They have not set foot in this town since Rebecca left. Whenever I ask them for help, whenever I hint if they could take the grandkids for a long weekend, the same string of excuses arises: a cruise through the islands, a golf tournament in Boca Raton, or an unavoidable dinner. To them, I am just the son who did not know how to make money, a failure clinging to a thread of hope that they cut long ago. But as I watch my 3 children sleep, I know that thread is the only thing keeping us afloat. Every time I watch my 3 children sleeping deeply in those bunk beds that creak at the slightest movement, I feel a knot in my chest that barely lets me swallow. Sometimes the silence of the night becomes a relentless judge, and I torture myself thinking if I could give them more. I dream of a house with a backyard that does not smell of old carpet, of dinners that do not depend on last-minute supermarket coupons, and of those trips to theme parks that they only know from TV commercials. But reality is a hamster wheel, moving forward minute by minute, crossing off hours on the calendar while trying to make my nightly hugs serve as a shield against precariousness. I know I live on the edge of total exhaustion, on that tightrope where a simple unforeseen event can ruin everything. There are nights when, after closing their doors and being left alone with the blue light of the screen, tears fall without permission. I do not cry for the fiction I try to create, but for the overwhelming sense of helplessness seeing that no matter how hard I work, I never seem to be good enough, nor earn enough, so they stop being the kids with worn-out sneakers. But I always end up drying my eyes with the sleeve of my sweatshirt. I cannot afford the luxury of breaking down in front of them. Emily, Oliver, and Lucas need to believe their father is a rock, even if inside he is pure sand. However, destiny understands no truces and decided to test us one freezing January morning. Emily woke up with a hoarse and violent cough that seemed to tear her chest. At first, I tried to convince myself it would be the typical seasonal flu circulating at school. But by noon, the situation took a turn. Emily was burning up with fever. Her lips were whitish and cracked, and she had a waxy pallor that froze my blood. She was curled up, balled up, looking at me with eyes so tired they seemed to have aged 10 years in one morning. Panic, that cold feeling that runs down your back, took over me. I called her pediatrician at the clinic, but upon describing the symptoms, his response was blunt. Nathan, do not wait. Take her to the hospital emergency room right now. I packed a backpack against the clock, a change of clothes, a bottle of water, and the bottle of fever reducer. Oliver and Lucas, scared by my nervousness, clung to my legs. What is wrong with Emily? Dad, is she going to be okay? My soul broke not having answers. I could only order them to put on their coats while I carried Emily in my arms, and we headed to the old sedan that took an eternity to start. The local hospital is barely 10 minutes away, but that journey was an infinite tunnel. I drove with tension engraved in my shoulders while with my right hand I squeezed my daughter's cold little hand. In the rearview mirror, I saw the little ones in their booster seats, in dead silence, with their eyes wide open from bewilderment. Everything is going to be fine, honey. We are almost there, I whispered. Although in reality, those words were the last nail I was trying to hold on to myself. Upon arrival, triage was fast. Seeing Emily's condition, the doctors took her to the pediatric observation area almost immediately. I stayed in the waiting room squeezing Oliver and Lucas's hands with my pulse racing. A nurse approached to ask for medical history and insurance information, and I stammered data, dates, and allergies, feeling that oxygen was not reaching my lungs. After 2 hours that seemed like centuries, the doctor came out with a face of unbearable gravity. He explained that Emily presented severe anemia and alarming platelet levels. They suspected a serious hematological disorder. He mentioned the word leukemia, and the world stopped. Cancer. That word echoed in my head like a sledgehammer blow in the middle of the night. With trembling fingers, I dialed Rebecca's number. Emily is admitted. It is serious. They say it might be leukemia. I need you to come. I cannot manage the kids and be with her at the same time. I begged her, swallowing my pride. Her answer was an ice dart. Nathan, you know, I am in another chapter of my life. I cannot leave my job and my life here to go back to that town. You will have to manage alone, as always. The beep of the cut call was like the sound of a sentence. Desperate, I called my parents in Florida. I hoped that given the gravity, the grandparent instinct would overcome their selfishness. But their response was more of the same. They were in the middle of a trip through Europe and did not plan to interrupt it for what they called a scare that surely will pass in a few days. I stood there in the middle of the aseptic hospital corridor, clutching my head so as not to crumble. Emily was in a bed surrounded by machines, and Oliver and Lucas were still glued to my knees waiting for me to do something. I was alone. I had no one in the world, except 3 children depending on a man who felt he was sinking. I took Oliver and Lucas to a small waiting room attached to the pediatric oncology zone. There, between a couple of storybooks and some plastic toys that had seen better days, I tried to make time not weigh so heavily on them. I collapsed into one of those rigid plastic chairs of an aseptic blue with the laptop on my knees. I had to finish an assignment about outdoor decoration trends for a real estate website. I needed that payment so the bank account would not go into the red before the week ended. But the words blurred. My mind was a knot of loose wires. Every time a nurse came out of Emily's room with an expressionless face, I felt my heart stop for an instant, as if the monitor of my own life depended on her steps. That afternoon, Emily opened her eyes. She looked at me with a fragility that tore me apart inside. "Daddy, I am very tired. My hands feel very heavy," she whispered with a thread of a voice. I sat on the edge of the bed, took her small hand, now covered in 4 lines and medical tape, and tried to keep my voice from trembling. "I know, my love. You are doing wonderfully. You are a champion, and Daddy is not going to move from here." Oliver and Lucas approached stealthily, as if afraid to break the air, and ended up overcome by sleep on the chairs in the room. I threw my jacket over them, trying to protect them from the cold hospital air conditioning, and stayed there watching over the sleep of all 3. That night, I did not sleep a wink. I dedicated myself to deciphering the lights of the monitors and the rhythmic hum of the infusion pump, feeling loneliness seeping into my bones. At dawn, the hematologist confirmed my worst fears. Emily needed a prolonged admission. The treatment was going to be aggressive and the tests constant. The world came crashing down on me. How was I going to manage that? I could not leave Oliver and Lucas alone in the apartment miles away, nor could I leave Emily alone in that hostile environment of white coats. After insisting a lot and almost pleading with the social worker and the nursing team, invoking my situation as a single father with no support network, they managed to make room for us. The 4 of us, well, the 3 who were still standing, crowded into that room bathed in the harsh light of fluorescent tubes. Our diet was reduced to survival. Cold sandwiches from the hospital cafeteria, juice boxes from the vending machine, and watered-down coffees that tasted like cardboard. Oliver and Lucas, with that almost cruel adaptability of children, played with their toy cars on the linoleum floor while I alternated caring for Emily with watching the little ones. I had the constant terror that one would fall or be a nuisance in the hallway. Those days stretched like gum, becoming a shapeless mass of exhaustion and disinfectant. I was at the limit, but the engine of necessity did not allow me to stop. Every morning my body screamed at me for the hours slept in an impossible position in the chair. I would get up before they came to take vitals. I woke Oliver and Lucas, washed their faces in the room's small bathroom, and ran them to the public school closest to the hospital, where I managed to enroll them on an emergency basis. As soon as the school gate closed behind them, I flew back to the hospital. Emily was still there, pale, with lips cracked by medication. I squeezed her hand and whispered stories of magic forests where needles did not exist. During the mornings, I performed impossible juggling acts. With one hand I held the water cup for Emily, and with the other, I typed articles to make ends meet. At noon, a quick sandwich in the cafeteria while checking email, and then off to get the kids again. The old car knew the way by heart. Oliver and Lucas got in telling me things about recess, but their eyes always sought the answer to the same silent question about their sister. At night, the hospital room became our living room. Oliver told Emily about the goals he had scored, and Lucas filled sheets of paper with scribbles. I took advantage of those moments of relative calm to finish my copywriting assignments with an empty soul and a wrecked back. Day after day, the cycle suffocated me. There were nights when exhaustion overcame me and I passed out on the keyboard, waking up suddenly with Lucas crying, "Daddy, where are you? I am scared." In those instants of total darkness, I looked at my 2 small sons sleeping hugged in a wing chair and then squeezed Emily's hand. "I have to keep going," I repeated to myself like a mantra. "I have to be the bridge that crosses them to the other side of this storm." The days at the hospital dragged with a nightmare slowness. Oliver and Lucas, with that almost unnatural resilience children have, ended up blending in with the environment of the pediatric oncology waiting room. Oliver spent hours drawing superheroes with vibrant colored capes to stick on the headboard of his sister's bed, while Lucas, oblivious to the real drama, clung to his worn plastic dinosaur and babbled stories of distant jungles on the linoleum floor. I tried to keep them busy, inventing games between the vending machines, praying they would not notice what was evident to any adult's eyes, that Emily, the big sister who always protected them, was fading like a candle in a draft. In a moment of absolute despair, I dialed Rebecca's number again. My pride no longer existed, only necessity remained. "Rebecca, I beg you, Emily needs you." I told her, and my own voice sounded strange, broken, and pleading. She is getting weaker. Come see her even if it is just for an afternoon. The kids ask for you. But her answer was, if possible, sharper than the last. Nathan, I already told you. I have closed that chapter. I cannot throw away everything I have built here to go back to a place that only brings me bad memories. You are their father. You handle it. The beep of the ended call pierced my chest. I also called my parents seeking a trace of humanity. We will go as soon as we close up the beach condo and get back from the cruise. Nathan, have patience, son. Be strong. They dismissed me with a lightness that seemed like a cruel joke. We were alone. Only Emily, the little ones, and I, locked in a room that smelled of disinfectant and hopelessness. Angela, one of the afternoon shift nurses, became our only anchor to sanity. She had brown hair always gathered in an impeccable ponytail, a clean gaze, and a way of speaking that, although firm and professional, radiated genuine warmth. Every time she came in to change Emily's medication or check the monitor levels, she made time to stroke Oliver's hair or leave a sticker for Lucas. Your children are brave, Nathan, she commented one night, while Lucas nodded off resting on my lap. What you are doing for them. You are an incredible father. I could only manage a bitter smile. I am not incredible, Angela. I am just a man trying to keep the roof from falling on us while everything else collapses. One morning, after 3 weeks that felt like 3 centuries of admission, the chief hematologist asked me to accompany him to his office. Dr. Henry, a man of about 50 with tired eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, indicated for me to sit. The office was small, stuffed with files and smelling of old paper and cold coffee. I sat in the visitor's chair, squeezing my hands with such force I felt my own fingernails digging into my palms. Nathan, he began, and that use of my first name made my hair stand on end. We have the definitive results of the bone marrow biopsy and cytometry. Emily has acute myeloid leukemia, what we call AML. The word cancer wasn't spoken, but it exploded in my head with the force of a grenade. I felt the blood draining from my face, leaving me cold, empty. How serious is it, doctor? Be clear, please, I asked with a threat of a voice. Dr. Henry sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. It is a very aggressive type of leukemia, Nathan. The prognosis in pediatrics is complex and the treatment will be extremely hard. We will start chemotherapy cycles immediately. But I have to be honest with you. The survival rate is not as high as we would like. I need you to be very strong from here on out. I do not remember how I managed to get up from that chair, nor how I crossed the hallway. I only know I ended up leaning against the cold wall, near the coffee machines, holding my head to contain a scream that was tearing my throat. Emily, my 8-year-old girl, the one who dreamed of being a veterinarian and flying on dragons, was fighting a battle to the death against an invisible enemy I could barely comprehend. I wanted to break the glass, scream at Rebecca about her selfishness, curse my parents' indifference. But I could not. I had to swallow the poison, wash my face in the hospital bathroom, enter that room with my best smile, and tell my daughter that Daddy was there and that as long as he was there, nothing bad could happen to her. The following weeks became a blurry whirlwind of agony and hospital smell. Emily started the chemotherapy cycles, and every time I saw her in that adjustable bed, losing her precious brown hair and with her skin becoming translucent, I felt a piece of my soul being ripped out. She, with a bravery that shamed me, tried to talk. She asked about Oliver's drawings and Lucas's daycare and forced a smile when I read her favorite fairy tales. But I saw how the light in her eyes was retreating, like a candle flickering under a gale we could not stop. Oliver and Lucas, despite their young age, sensed the air in the room had become heavier. Oliver stopped drawing superheroes with capes. Now he painted a small girl in a huge bed, surrounded by yellow flowers. Lucas, with the innocence that sometimes hurts more than a blow, kept asking, "When is Emily coming to play hide-and-seek with me, Daddy?" Angela, the nurse, was there for us, far beyond what her work shift dictated. She became our protective shadow, offering us comfort in silences more than in words. One afternoon, while I watched Emily's restless sleep, Angela brought me a hot coffee in a paper cup. "You have to go down for a moment to get some air, Nathan," she told me with that soft voice that admitted no replies. "I know you want to be her rock, but even rocks erode." You are human. Do not forget. I looked at her wanting to thank her, but the knot in my throat was already an insurmountable wall. One night, while the little ones slept huddled in the armchair, Angela sat a moment with me in the hallway. She asked if I wanted to talk, and, as if a dam that had been holding back water for years broke, I started letting it all out. Rebecca's cowardly flight, my parents' disdain, the visceral terror of losing Emily, and the constant doubt of whether I would be able to raise the other two without falling apart along the way. Angela listened without interrupting, keeping her hand firm on my shoulder. I lost my older brother to a similar illness. She confessed with her gaze lost on the linoleum floor. I know that helplessness of wanting to trade your life for theirs, but you are not alone in this hallway, Nathan. Emily, Oliver, and Lucas need you more than ever, and they are your true masterpiece. Her words were like a balm, a fresh breeze in the middle of a fire. However, destiny listens to no reasons. A week later, Emily's condition took an irreversible turn. The chemotherapy was not giving the expected results. The malignant cells were too fast, too voracious. Emily started having very high fevers that would not subside and bone pain that made her moan in her sleep. I spent nights awake, holding her bony hand and singing her the lullabies I sang when she was a baby in that creaky apartment, although my voice broke in every verse. "Daddy, I am very tired," she whispered one night, barely opening her eyelids. "I want to go home, to my bed with the star sheets." I leaned over her and kissed her forehead soaked in sweat, letting my tears lose themselves in her pillow. "I will take you home, princess. I promise you by what you love most." It was a promise the universe prevented me from keeping. A few days later, in the quietest hour of dawn, Emily passed away. I was reading her the story of a princess who managed to tame a dragon when the monitor alarm started beeping with a frantic and metallic sound. I will hate the rest of my life. The nurses entered immediately. Dr. Henry arrived with the resuscitation team, but I already knew. I knew by the sudden silence in my daughter's chest. I knew Emily was gone. I held her in my arms while the doctors stepped aside with respect. Her little body weighed nothing anymore. The heat was escaping between my fingers. "Emily, do not go," I whispered with a broken voice, pressing my forehead to hers. "Please, do not leave Daddy alone." But silence was her only answer. The world collapsed beneath my feet. I do not know how long I was there, broken, crying on her motionless chest. Oliver and Lucas woke up amidst the chaos of doctors and lights and ran to hug me, scared. Oliver sobbed, "Where is Emily? Dad, why is she not moving?" Lucas held my hand tightly and whispered, "Do not cry, Daddy. I will take care of you." But I could not stop trembling. I felt I had failed in the most sacred thing, protecting my daughter's life. Angela stayed with me all those black hours. She was my anchor in the void. She took charge of taking the kids to the playroom so I could say goodbye to Emily alone without the weight of being the strong father. When I finally left the room, clutching to my chest a small wool sweater that still smelled of her, Angela handed me a glass of water. "Nathan," she told me, looking into my eyes, "I know you feel the road has ended here, but look at those two children waiting for you out there. They need you more than air. And Emily. Emily would want her story not to end in this room." I could not answer, but deep in my pain, I knew she was right. I wiped my tears with a brusque gesture. I breathed the aseptic hospital air one last time and went to collect my children. "We will be okay," I said aloud, even if at that moment my soul was a field of ashes. The days that followed the burial were a dark void, a succession of blurred hours where time seemed to have stopped. I organized Emily's funeral in the town's small chapel, a somber and heartbreaking ceremony under a leaden sky. It was just Oliver, Lucas, me, and a handful of neighbors who, with that silent respect of small towns, came to offer condolences. Rebecca did not show up. She limited herself to sending a text message. "I am so sorry, Nathan. I do not have the strength to be there." My parents arrived 2 days later, when everything was over, loaded with empty apologies and anecdotes from their trip I no longer wanted to hear. I stood in front of the small grave under the cold sun, wondering if air would ever enter my lungs again without burning. I felt like an empty shell. The mirror reflected a stranger with bloodshot eyes and a face gaunt from insomnia. Every time I passed the children's room, my heart shattered. Her bunk was still there with the flowered quilt she liked so much and her favorite stuffed animal, waiting for a hug that would never come. Oliver and Lucas were the only threads keeping me from sinking into absolute darkness, although I confess there were moments of terrifying weakness. One night, with the kids already asleep, I stared at a bottle of sleeping pills on the nightstand. A perverse temptation invaded me, to imagine everything fading away, the pain turning off at once. But just as my fingers grazed the bottle, I heard Lucas murmur "Daddy" in his sleep from the other room and remembered Oliver's look, who now always watched me as if looking for a sign that I was not going to leave too. I could not do it. I threw the bottle into the bottom of the trash can and collapsed on the kitchen floor, crying inconsolably. "You have to live for them, Nathan," I repeated until my voice ran out. "You have to be their raft." Our apartment plunged into a sepulchral silence, only broken by the noise of the television or meal shifts. Oliver became an excessively quiet child. He stopped drawing his superheroes and spent afternoons painting flowers one after another, trying to copy them from Emily's quilt. "It is so Emily can see them from up there, Daddy, so she knows we do not forget," he said in a whisper that broke my soul. Lucas, being so small, did not quite process the permanence of death. He curled up in my lap with his dinosaur and asked, "When is Emily coming back from the hospital field trip?" I kissed his forehead and, swallowing tears, told him that now Emily was a star watching over us at night. I tried to make routines save us, taking them to school, preparing dinner, reading the bedtime story. But every gesture weighed as if I were carrying stones. I kept writing mediocre articles on how to save on the grocery bill to survive. But when I opened my novel file, from the ashes, I froze. The cursor blinked like a reproach. How could I write about the meaning of existence when I felt the center of my universe had vaporized? It was Angela who once again threw a line to my shipwreck. One Saturday afternoon, she appeared at the house without warning with a box of freshly baked cookies and a couple of books for the kids. Oliver and Lucas lit up seeing her for the first time in weeks. The living room did not seem like a mausoleum. She sat on the rug to play with them, and later, when the little ones got distracted, she looked at me with that lucidity only those who have crossed the desert possess. "I do not know how to go on, Angela," I confessed, lowering my guard. "I feel like I am pretending to be alive." She spoke to me of her brother again, but this time she went further. "There were months when I also felt like an imposter, Nathan, but I understood that moving forward, writing your stories, and taking care of these children is the only way Emily does not disappear completely. She lives in your resistance." Her words did not erase the pain, but they gave me permission to feel it without it suffocating me. That same night, after putting the kids to bed, I opened the manuscript and suddenly the dam broke. The words began to flow with a violence and truth I had never experienced before. I wrote about Emily, about her laugh filling the hallways, and how she squeezed my hand on those hospital nights. I wrote about Rebecca's betrayal, about the glass-like coldness of my parents, and about the loneliness of a father who feels like a fraud but keeps cooking breakfast every morning. I wrote about being a castaway who, instead of giving up, decides to build a boat with the wreckage. I wrote in the silence of dawn, while the rhythm of Oliver and Lucas's breathing set the tempo. Each page was a scream, a way to keep the fire lit and finally look my own pain in the eye. Angela became our anchor, that safe harbor to moor in when the storms of grief raged. She came to the house often, sometimes with new books for the kids, or simply to share a silence that was no longer uncomfortable. When with certain modesty I told her about the new pages I was writing, her reaction was immediate. "You have to finish it, Nathan. You have to empty yourself onto that paper. I feel what you have there is going to reach a lot of people." I used to laugh with a bitterness that still burned my throat. "They are nothing more than the ramblings of a single, failed father, Angela. No one cares about the sorrow of an ordinary guy." But she took my hand with a firmness that forced me to look at her. "You are wrong. It is the story of a man who did not give up when the world ran him over. And that, Nathan, deserves to be told." Her words were the spark I needed to stop writing out of inertia and start writing out of necessity. I spent months pouring myself into the book, reliving every hospital night, Emily's translucent gaze, and Oliver's obsession with painting yellow flowers for his sister. I wrote about the absolute loneliness of emergency corridors, and about those nights I was about to throw in the towel, but also about the little lifesavers. Lucas's spontaneous laughter or the soft light Angela brought with her every time she crossed our threshold. Life remained a battlefield. The landlord sent increasingly aggressive reminders for rent delays, and bills piled up in the entrance. But the manuscript of From the Ashes became my trench. Little by little, the atmosphere in the apartment began to change. Oliver returned to his colored pencils and superheroes, although now he always drew a small flower on their chest, like a secret power emblem. Lucas dragged me back to his dinosaur wars and building castles with sofa cushions. One afternoon, Angela appeared with a cake simply to celebrate a good day. While the children blew out the candles with shining eyes, I felt immense gratitude. I understood she was much more than a compassionate nurse. She was the person who understood me without needing explanations. She did not try to fix my life or replace Emily's void. She was simply there like a lantern on a dark road. And I, despite the scars, began to allow myself to feel something resembling hope. 6 months after Emily's departure, I put the final period on the manuscript. I sent it to several publishers in New York, although my faith was almost nil after years of silence and automatic rejection letters. But one October morning, while I was in the kitchen reheating watered-down coffee and Oliver and Lucas were fighting over the last cookie in the pack, my phone vibrated with a new email. The subject read, "Publishing Proposal, From the Ashes." My hands trembled so much I almost dropped the cup. "We have been deeply moved by the honesty of your story. We believe this book has the capacity to connect with the hearts of thousands of readers," the message said. I could not believe it after a decade of invisibility. Someone saw the value of the words I had written soaked in tears. I started working with an editor named Samantha, a woman with a calm voice who helped me polish the text respecting its original rawness. "This is not just your story, Nathan," she repeated in every call. "It is the map for anyone who has lost their way and decided to keep walking in the dark." From the Ashes went on sale on a rainy Tuesday. I only aspired to sell enough copies to settle my debts and move to a better place. But the book became an unstoppable phenomenon, a tide that swept us all away. A major literary review described it as a heartbreaking love letter to fatherhood and broken hearts. The story went viral on social media, and in barely 2 weeks, it was on the bestseller list of major bookstores. I started receiving messages from all over the country. Parents who had gone through the same thing, exhausted single mothers, people looking for comfort. Every letter I read was like placing a new brick in the reconstruction of my own soul. I felt that somehow Emily was managing from somewhere for her father to finally be heard. Interviews arrived, television studio spotlights in New York, and book signings across the country. Under the artificial light of cameras, I told the story of Emily, Oliver, and Lucas again and again. When a journalist asked what had pushed me to keep writing in the middle of the shipwreck, I answered thinking of the shine Emily had before getting sick. My children. Emily taught me what unconditional love is. Oliver and Lucas taught me that despite everything, you have to keep breathing. I wrote to keep the promise that their father would never give up. I went from being an invisible author to a recognized man giving talks in neighborhood libraries, grief workshops, and major literary events. Every time I went up on a stage, I felt a warm breeze on the back of my neck. I was sure it was Emily smiling at me from somewhere, proud to see her father no longer walked hunched over. The book's profits started arriving in the bank account. It was not an immense fortune, but for us, it changed everything. I paid the back rent with interest. We filled the pantry with fresh products, and for the first time in years, I stopped sweating cold every time the electric company envelope arrived. I decided it was time to leave behind that suffocating apartment that held the echo of Emily's absence in every corner. I found a small house on the outskirts with a small backyard and lots of natural light. On moving day, Oliver ran from room to room, shouting that finally, he would have a desk for his drawings. And Lucas jumped on the grass with his plastic dinosaur. Finally, after so much mud, I felt I was giving them a true home. However, the pain for Emily never went away completely. I simply learned to live with it, like someone living with an old scar that hurts when the weather changes. Some nights I still cried, not out of weakness, but out of pure humanity. Angela remained our constant, our compass. She came to the new house loaded with pots for the garden, and the kids received her as if she were a heroine from their comics. In fact, Oliver renamed her Super Angela. Seeing her laugh with them, I understood that Angela was not just the nurse who took care of us in the hospital. She was the woman who had restored my faith that life still had something good to offer me. One afternoon, sitting on the porch while the sun set behind the mountains, she took my hand. "You have done something incredible, Nathan. And I do not say it because of the book's success, but because you did not allow pain to turn you into stone." I started attending a support group for parents who had gone through the loss of a child. At first, I felt like an intruder, but listening to their stories, I understood my loneliness was shared. I spoke of Emily and her imaginary dragon. A woman who had lost her daughter decades ago squeezed my hand. "You are a brave father, Nathan. She lives in every word you write." Inspired by them, I planted a rose bush in the center of the garden, of those red roses Emily liked so much. Oliver and Lucas helped me dig the dirt. Now, every time the flowers bloom, I feel Emily continues sending us signs of life. Our routine was not perfect, but it was real. One Sunday, Oliver brought me a drawing that left me speechless. Lucas and I appeared holding hands, and between us a girl with wings surrounding us with a hug of light on a cloud. "It is Emily," he explained with a maturity that scared me. "I think she is happy now because nothing hurts anymore." I hugged him with misty eyes. "Of course she is, son. And we are going to try to be happy too, for her." A year after publication, the past decided to knock on the door. My mother phoned me one night. Her voice sounded more fragile, loaded with a late regret that was no longer of much use to me. "Nathan, your father and I have read the book. We are very sorry for not having been there," she stammered. I listened to her apologies, but I felt an unbridgeable distance. I remembered when I begged her for help while Emily was agonizing and they preferred not to interrupt their cruise. "Thanks for calling," I replied with a frozen calm. "But my children need people who are there when things get ugly, not when I am on TV. You can see the kids on short visits, but do not expect things to go back to how they were before." I hung up knowing my priority was protecting the peace that had cost us so much to build. The bitterest surprise was Rebecca. She called me one night with a sweet voice tone, almost seductive, as if the 2 years of abandonment had been barely a parenthesis. "Nathan, I have seen your success. I have read the book and realized how much I love you. I want us to be a family again, to start from scratch in that new house," she told me. I froze remembering her refusal to visit her dying daughter. "Rebecca, you left when we needed you most," I snapped firmly. "You were not there on the nights of fever, nor when your children cried asking why mom did not call. There is no longer room for you at this table." Upon hanging up, I felt I removed a weight of tons. I did not feel hate, just a healing indifference. While others tried to jump on the bandwagon of our new life, Angela stayed silently and loyally. Our relationship blossomed in the details, in shared coffees, in glances of complicity over the children's heads. One night, under the porch stars, I confessed, "Angela, you helped me see that life is worth it even when it hurts." She smiled with that sweetness that had saved me months ago. "You are stronger than you think, Nathan." In that moment, I knew I was deeply in love with her. A mature love, born of understanding and not the need to fill a void. She did not come to replace anyone. She came to bring her own light. Oliver and Lucas grow healthy and strong. Oliver sometimes asks me if Emily sees him when he scores a goal at recess, and I assure him she is his most faithful spectator. Lucas, with his 4 years, invents stories of Emily flying among the clouds on a colored dragon. Angela is already part of us. One day, while we finished fixing the garden, I asked her to join us for real, to be the family destiny had snatched from us. She nodded with tears in her eyes. "We already are, Nathan. For a long time. We have not erased the past because the past made us who we are." Emily is in every rose, in every page, and in every corner of our house. I have learned to convert pain into the engine of my journey, and I keep writing for those who need to know you can get out of the well. One morning, while watching Oliver and Lucas run under the spring sun with Angela by my side, I felt absolute peace. Our life is not perfect, but it is ours. A new family raised from the ashes with love and above all with hope. I looked at the sky, where the blue was more intense than ever, and whispered, "Emily, We made it. Are you proud of us? In that instant, a soft breeze caressed my face as if she, from her cloud, was returning the kiss I could not give her that last day. Comment. As I reflected on this journey, I was struck by how often we discover our greatest strength in our darkest moments. It reminds us that true love is not about grand gestures or wealth, but about the quiet, consistent choice to show up, even when you are falling apart inside. It also shows that grief leaves a permanent mark, but it does not have to end our ability to feel joy again. One of the most powerful lessons is the courage it takes to set firm boundaries with people who only return when life is easy. Protecting your peace and your family's well-being is not selfish, but a necessary act of self-respect. It is also a beautiful reminder to keep your heart open to genuine kindness, which often comes from unexpected places. Healing does not mean forgetting the past, but learning to carry it as you build a new future. I hope this story encourages you to hold your loved ones a little closer and trust your own resilience. No matter how deep the well feels right now, please believe there is always a way back to the light. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.